Hello children. Now we will start the next chapter, that is chapter 7 of your book, The Living and the Non-Living. You must have seen multiple things around you like chair, pen, pencils, water bottles, your bed sheets, cloths, photo frames, wardrobe, almirahs. All those things are considered as non-living. Whereas the things which you usually see around you like birds, insects, human beings, microorganisms which you can't see but they are present, they are considered as a living organism. On the road you must have seen the cows roaming here and there. Sometimes the dogs are there. Those are considered as living. If you visit a zoo, various snakes which are displayed in the cage, or lion, tiger, whatsoever present in that zoo are considered as living. All the plants, the grasses which you see around you or in your lawn are considered as living. So, how we'll differentiate between them, that we will study in this chapter. But before that, we'll discuss what is the common thing between them. The term which we have to discuss now is matter. Anything which has a certain or which has a fixed mass and occupies a space is known as matter. ऐसी कोई भी चीज बच्चों जिसका एक फिक्स मास हो और वो एक स्पेस ऑक्यूपाई करे. स्पेस ऑक्यूपाई मीन्स it must have a volume. That thing is known as matter. Physical states of matter are three. Matter is divided into three states on the basis of physical shape, physical structures. First, solids, liquids, and gases. You must have seen a packet of chips. It is filled with gas, nitrogen gas. It has a certain mass. उसका भी कुछ ना कुछ mass होता है. And the unit to measure mass is grams, kilograms, tons, metric tons, etc. So, anything which has a certain or fixed mass and occupy a fixed space, or you can write, or possess a fixed volume, that is known as matter. उसे हम क्या बोलते हैं? Matter. Matter is the common thing between the living and non-living. कोई पूछे बच्चे आपसे, there may be a question asked you that what is the common characteristic between the living and non-living? क्या कॉमन कैरेक्टरिस्टिक है लिविंग और नॉन लिविंग के बीच में? दैट कॉमन कैरेक्टरिस्टिक इज मैटर. बोथ द थिंग्स, ईदर लिविंग और नॉन लिविंग, ऑक्यूपाइज अ स्पेस एंड हैज अ सर्टेन मास. ये मार्कर बच्चे, इसका एक मास है और ये एक जगह घेरता है. एक जगह घेर रहा है बच्चे. इट ऑक्यूपाइज अ स्पेस, इट हैज अ सर्टेन वॉल्यूम. सो इट इज मैटर, बट इट इज अ नॉन लिविंग मैटर. I am standing in front of you. I am living organism. Human beings are considered as living. But my body is also made up of matter. Because I occupy a certain space and I have a mass. Approximately 75 kg, 80 kg. That is the mass. You also have a certain mass. As well as you occupy a certain space. आप जगह घेरते हैं बच्चे और आपका mass है 40 kg, 30 kg, 35 kg. So, you are also considered as matter. So anything which has a mass and occupies space is considered as matter. So both living things and non-living things occupy space and has a mass. Both of these are considered as matter.
When we look around, we find a wide variety of things like human beings, trees, cars, stones, birds, insects, clothes, papers, and pencils. Human beings, trees, birds, and insects are living things. Others like cars, stones, clothes, papers, and pencils are non-living things. Both living things and the non-living things are made up of matter. We know that anything that has mass and occupies space is called matter. So, All living and non-living things have mass and they occupy space. All living things look different from one another, but they possess some common characteristics which differentiate them from the non-living things.
Certain characteristics on which we differentiate between the living organisms from the non-living. There are certain characteristics possessed by the living organisms only, which are not possessed by the non-living, and on those characteristics, on those features, we differentiate them from non-living organisms. So, the first characteristics which is possessed by the living organism is cellular structure. What do you mean by cellular structure? All the living organisms, whether it's microorganisms, plants or animals, all the living organisms are made up of cells. The structural and functional unit of a living organism is cell. Cell is the smallest living unit of a complex living organism. We are also made up of cells. Whereas non-living things do not made up of or do not possess cells. Living things cell से मिलकर बनी है और non-living things cell से मिलकर नहीं बनी. Second thing, structural organization. It is also referred as complex organization. We will discuss in detail, bache, that in living organisms, cells unite together or join together, grouped together to form tissues. Tissues joined together to form organs. Organs joined together to form organ systems, and organ systems combined together to form a complete organism. So there is a complexity level, beta. First cells, then group of cells, then group of tissues, then group of organs, then organ system, and then organ systems combined together to form an organism. This complexity is not present in non-living things. Third is, living things move. I can move from one place to another. Plants cannot be able to move, but still they shows the movement of their parts. Like chui mui. You must have heard about the plant, but touch me not. Chui mui. Its scientific name is Mimosa pudica. We will discuss in detail, bache. When you touch the Mimosa pudica, the chui mui or touch me not plant, its leaves closed. So that is a characteristic that shows the movement, bache. So that's the basis on which we can differentiate between living and non-living. Living things move, but non-living things do not move. Now a question arises, but sir, we have seen the car moving on the road. Car does not move on its own. It requires a fuel to move. कार अपने आप नहीं चलती बच्चे. उसे चलाने के लिए किसकी जरूरत पड़ती है? एक्सटर्नल फोर्स की. बाहर के फोर्स की जरूरत है. But living things move on their own by their internal force. अंदर के फोर्स से चलते हैं बच्चे. Next, living things need food, whereas non-living things do not need food. You never gives a vegetable or a chapati to your pencil. हम कभी एक पेंसिल को बच्चे अपनी चपाती या अपनी वेजिटेबल नहीं खिलाते, फ्रूट नहीं खिलाते उसको. It works when we hold it in our hands and write it. Our force tends to move it. Living things, whereas, require food. If we don't eat food, we'll become weak and ultimately we die. So, we need food. Why we need food? To gain energy. And energy is required by the cells to proper function. Next, watching, living things respire. What is respiration? The breaking of the food to produce energy. Why respiration is necessary? Because we require energy. And how we get that energy? By respiration. How? Respiration means the breakdown of this food to produce energy. So living things require food, and that food they require, they eat for energy, and for energy they require respiration. Whereas non-living things do not respire. They do not respire, they do not break down the food to produce energy. Next, living things excrete. What do you mean by excretion? Removal of waste products out of the body is known as excretion. अपनी बॉडी से वेस्ट प्रोडक्ट्स को रिमूव आउट करना, बाहर निकालना बच्चे, एक्सक्लूड करना, दैट इज नोन एज एक्सक्रीशन. उसे हम क्या बोलते हैं बच्चे? एक्सक्रीशन. सो लिविंग थिंग्स एक्सक्रीट, whereas non-living things do not excrete. Non-living things कोई वेस्ट मटेरियल प्रोड्यूस नहीं करते. They do not excrete as they are not made up of cells बच्चे. Living things made up of cells, so cells produce a waste material, and living things must exclude, must remove that waste material from their body. Next, living things grow. Non-living things also grow. And what is the difference? Living things shows the growth from the outer part as well as from the internal part. They shows both type of growths. They grow externally as well as internally. Whereas non-living things only grows externally. Living things बच्चों internally भी बढ़ती हैं और externally भी. But non-living things only shows the growth externally. वो सिर्फ बाहरी तरीके पर बढ़ती हैं, बाहरी तौर से बढ़ती हैं बच्चे. Next, living things have a definite lifespan. First of all, we'll discuss what is a lifespan. A limited age for which a living organisms live, that age is known as lifespan. एक फिक्स एज है बच्चे एक ऑर्गेनिज्म की जीने की, that is known as lifespan. So, living organisms lives for a fixed lifespan, बच्चे, fixed time, whereas non-living things do not have a fixed lifespan. Living things will die after a particular interval of time, whereas non-living things never die. Next, living things reproduce. What is reproduce or reproduction? The production of new organisms from one parent of its own kind. The production of young ones by a particular organism, which newly born organism is just like that the previous one. That is known as reproduction. As human beings reproduce human beings. हम बच्चे अपने माता पिता से पैदा हुए हैं, we reproduce from our mother and father. We are just like them. We are human beings. That is reproduction. Reproduction is necessary to maintain the number of living organisms. If living organisms do not reproduce, then at one point all the living organisms perish from the earth. अगर लिविंग ऑर्गेनिज्म रिप्रोड्यूस ही नहीं होंगे तो सारे के सारे लिविंग ऑर्गेनिज्म एक लिमिटेड लाइफ स्पैन के बाद मर जाएंगे. तो सारी लाइफ क्या हो जाएगी? पैरिश, गायब हो जाएगी, विलुप्त हो जाएगी बच्चे. नेक्स्ट, लिविंग थिंग्स रिस्पॉन्ड टू अ स्टिमुलाई. फर्स्ट विल डिस्कस व्हाट इज अ स्टिमुलाई. Any environmental change which brings about a movement or response in an organism is known as stimuli. बच्चे, कोई भी ऐसा environmental change like light, heat, touch, जिसके अगेंस्ट लिविंग ऑर्गेनिज्म रिस्पॉन्स करते हैं, मूवमेंट शो करते हैं, ग्रोथ करते हैं, दैट इन्वायरमेंटल चेंज इज नोन एज स्टिमुलाई. लिविंग थिंग्स respond to a stimuli, whereas non-living things do not respond to a stimuli. The property of the living organisms due to which they respond, they gives a response to a stimuli, that property is known as sensitivity. So living things possess sensitivity, whereas non-living things do not possess sensitivity. They do not give any response to any environmental change. So these are the characteristics bache, on which we differentiate between the living and non-living things. Now, in our further lectures, we'll discuss the details of these characteristics.
Living things are made up of cells. A building is made up of bricks. So, a brick is the unit of construction. Likewise, all living things are made up of tiny cells. Cell is the structural and functional unit of all living things. Some plants and animals consist of a single cell. They are called unicellular organisms. Amoeba, paramecium, bacteria, etc. are some common examples of unicellular organisms. Unicellular organisms are extremely small and are not visible to the naked eyes. They can only be seen with the help of a microscope and thus are called microscopic organisms. Most of the plants and animals we see around us are made up of millions of cells. They are called multicellular organisms. In multicellular organisms, the cells are not alike. Cells are of different sizes, shapes, and they perform different functions.
Now we will discuss the characteristics of living organisms. The first characteristic which we have to discuss in detail is living things are made up of cells. That is, living things possess cellular structure. All the living things, whether the microorganisms, plants or animals, are made up of cells. Cells are referred as the structural, which is responsible for the structure, as well as the functional, which is responsible for the functions of an organism. Both structural and functional unit of life, that is living organisms. A very important one marker question, bache. Name the structural and functional unit of life, functional and structural unit of living organisms. That the answer would be cells. On the basis of number of cells, the living organisms are classified into two forms. नंबर ऑफ सेल्स के बेसिस पर बच्चे हमने लिविंग ऑर्गेनिजम्स को दो फॉर्म्स में क्लासिफाई किया. फर्स्ट वन इज यूनिसेल्युलर ऑर्गेनिजम्स. एज द नेम इंडिकेट्स बच्चे, यूनिसेल्युलर इज मेड अप ऑफ टू थिंग्स. वन इज यूनि, दैट मीन्स सिंगल, एंड सेल्युलर मीन्स मेड अप ऑफ cells. So living organism that is made up of or that consists of one cell, single cell, those living organisms are considered as unicellular organisms. वो living organisms बच्चे जो सिर्फ एक सेल से मिलकर बने हैं, जिनमें सिर्फ एक ही सेल है, those living organisms are considered as unicellular. Amoeba, paramecium, bacteria, these all are unicellular organisms. To these organisms we cannot see by our naked eyes. For those organisms to see, we require our optical device. We require a special device named as microscope. That is why these kind of unicellular organisms are referred as microorganisms. Micro means very small, and organism means living things. The living things or living organisms which we cannot be able to see by our naked eyes. To see them, to watch them, to observe them, we require a special optical device, and that optical device is microscope. So if someone asks you a question that due to which discovery we can be able to see the unseen particles, the answer would be microscope. The discovery which led to the discovery of the invention which led to the discovery of microscopic world. ऐसी कौन सी इन्वेंशन थी जिसने माइक्रोस्कोपिक वर्ल्ड के दरवाजे खोल दिए हमारे लिए? The answer would be microscope. Then बच्चे, the second form is multicellular organisms. Multi means many, and cellular means made up of cells. The living organisms, those consist of many cells or made up of multiple cells, more than one cells, that is known as multicellular organisms. All the complex organisms which you see around yourself, like grasses, plants, banyan tree, coconut tree, banana tree, the neem has a scientific name, Azar digitine. That is the scientific name of neem. You must have seen around yourself. Kikar, Acacia nilotica, that you've seen around you. Mango, Mangifera indica. These are the scientific names that you will study in your class 9th bache. So those are multicellular organisms. These are plants. In animals as well, you see the cows, dogs, the puppies around yourself, the various, cattle like buffaloes, the human beings, lion, tiger, all those are animals and they are multicellular organisms. They are not made up of one cell. They are made up of millions or trillions or multiple cells. So that is the differentiation between the between the organisms on the basis of number of cells. So living things possess a cellular structure. That means they are made up of cells, whereas non-living things do not possess cells. They are devoid of cells.